Okay, great. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming onto this event today, joining us today for our webinar. This is part of our webinar series, Cybersecurity Best Practices. And today we'll be talking about vulnerability scans and patch management, specifically at school districts. These are critical tools to help school districts improve their security posture. My name is Daniel Eickhoff, and before we fire this up and have Jeff dive into the presentation, let me talk briefly here about why this is so important, why these tools are critical. Hackers are, give me 1 second here, I'm sorry, I have a small technical problem. Here we are. The education space is under attack. That is unfortunate. We have this tool that we created kind of recently. It's our own database. We created this map. We're tracking cybersecurity incidents across school districts across the country, and we kind of linking to news report. We give information on the type of attack, methods used. So it's a real interesting piece. You can check this out on our website. But to give a couple examples, hackers are after the children's data. Often they monetize it a couple different ways. First, they hold it for ransom. Typically, they leak some samples of the data at that time to best prove that they actually have it. But then even if the district might or might not pay the ransom, they might still sell it on the dark web and kind of profit from it a second time. And talking about cost of ransomware attacks, this is data from 2020, so I'm sure it's much higher now, but the average cost of a ransomware attack for a US school district is at $4 million. That is significant and definitely something we want to avoid. Attacks are getting more frequent, they're more complex, they're becoming more sophisticated. It's getting harder and harder for school districts to protect themselves. Even large districts like Ally Unified last fall, they got hit and they were vulnerable. One of the largest districts in the country, Minneapolis public schools, massive amount of data was leaked, and a huge, the community was not happy. This is an interesting example at Denver public schools. This happened back in the wintertime, and still now, 6 months later, we are finding out the extent of the damage. We're finding out how much data exactly was leaked. So, naturally, districts are trying to slow walk the release of that type of information sometimes, but the criminals are they're adapting and they're getting more brazen, because what they did here at Bluefield University, for example, the cyber criminals hijacked the school's emergency alert system. That's a system that the school uses to inform parents and students of any kind of emergency. And the hackers use that to communicate their demands and their, to the students and parents directly. That did not go over well with the parents. The school got into real hot water there. So it's a problem, and district administration is confirming that the education industry is now #1 target for cyber attacks. Why is that the case? Why are school districts being targeted more than any other organization? So 2 reasons. One, they're very lucrative targets, and 2, oftentimes, unfortunately, they're also kind of vulnerable targets. On the first topic, it's the sensitive information that the criminals are after, right? Academic records, medical records, some of those really dicey, we're talking sexual harassment, maltreatment allegations, really sensitive stuff we absolutely cannot have get out The other aspect is the financial aspect. So these kids have clean slates in terms of their identity, social security number, financial history, and the hackers take advantage of that. They steal that information. As the kids get of age, they start exploiting it, right? They open bank accounts, apply for credit cards, things like that. So we work with school districts exclusively, and many of them tell us the same kind of story. Many of them are in the same situation. They have understaffed, overworked IT teams. A lot of times they don't have dedicated security staff. They have limited cybersecurity stack that they have to make do with, and a lot of times they have outdated legacy systems that they are still using. These are hard to keep updated, to keep secure, to keep patched. Jeff's going to talk about that in a minute in detail. And then lastly, cybersecurity awareness, or the lack of, right? Not only with the students who are kids, but also faculty and staff are often vulnerable to social engineering, phishing attacks, things like that. So that's a problem. School districts have a lot on their plate managing IT. They don't have the bandwidth and the resources to chase alerts, keep up with fast evolving threats. And one thing that they certainly don't get around to doing is proactively looking for vulnerabilities and then working on addressing them before they can get exploited. But the good news is there are powerful tools that can help with that. So let's take a look at how school districts can use vulnerability assessment scans and patch management solutions to remediate vulnerabilities before it's too late. The benefit of these tools, and it's a little different than what we normally do, because every day when we talk about cybersecurity solutions, we're looking at more or less reactive ways of, we are reacting to threats and to attacks, and then we detect them, remediate them. These types of solutions here, vulnerability scans, patch management, these are proactive. So we are proactively identifying security weaknesses and gaps, and then we remediate those in order to mitigate the risks. And that allows us to protect that sensitive data that we talked about earlier. And it also helps us enhance network performance through fixing misconfigurations, the issue with outdated software and also firmware. And again, Jeff will, that's patching right there. Jeff will talk about that. And also it ensures compliance with all kinds of policies and regulations, not just CIPA and FERPA indirectly, but also even HIPAA, PCI, if the school is using credit cards for events. And obviously there's medical facilities. And lastly, your cybersecurity insurance, your cyber insurance company will be pleased to know that you're using these kinds of tools. So with that, Jeff, let's just dive in. Tell us a little bit about these solutions. And after this, we'll have time to answer questions. So everyone, please feel free to submit your questions using the Q&A tool or the chat in the platform. And then we'll make sure we get those answered towards the end.
All right. Thanks so much, Daniel, for the introduction. And thank you to everyone here for taking some time out of your day. My name is Jeff Tuttlebaum. I'm a senior solutions engineer here at Securus 360. And without further ado, we'll go ahead and dive in a little deeper on what Daniel was talking about as far as the vulnerability assessments and how they can benefit you. So little agenda for today. So we'll talk about prioritizing and remediating key findings, basically just getting rid of these, reducing your attack surface essentially before bad actors can leverage these common exploits against you and either exfiltrate data or leverage some kind of encryption-based ransomware, something like that. The idea is just to rid these problems before they can actually compromise you. We'll talk about some different types of vulnerabilities, and we'll take a look at an actual scan and what the results will look like. Detecting and patching misconfigurations, as Daniel alluded to as well, whether that's misconfigurations on the endpoint or with policies allowing things that they shouldn't. or outdated firmware, or just network misconfigurations. All of these things are items to take into account. Asset discovery is another part of it, where we'll dive a little further into that. Internal versus external vulnerability scans, both from within your network perimeter and outside of it. And lastly, we'll talk about some different deployment options for it, because there are a couple different approaches. So first, before we dive in deeper, why is vulnerability assessment necessary? And again, this approach is much more proactive as opposed to a reactive solution, waiting for something to happen and then containing the threat. That is absolutely vital as well, because unfortunately, when it comes to ransomware, there's no silver bullet. So you need to ensure your cybersecurity stack is as fortified as possible, so that you're taking care of things before they become a problem, and you have reactive solutions such as a MXDR solution, which we'll talk more about as well. That way you're covering yourself from both ends there as much as you can. And this will allow you to assess, patch, reconfigure things necessary, because security is really, it's never a one and done thing. It's always just this constantly evolving threat, especially as new threats come on the landscape. You're always going to have to adapt your cybersecurity posture to it, and we want to help you with that as much as we can. And regardless of what the vulnerability assessment solution is, whether you run a scan with our services or somewhere else, the vulnerability assessment solution should provide ample remediation instructions, not just, maybe if it just lists the CVE or something like that. You want it to actually tell you how to remediate it, or have it auto patch it accordingly if that's the type of implementation, which we'll dive into. So some brief examples of common vulnerabilities would be weak or default passwords. And I would actually add to that password reuse. So of course you want to follow the standard conventions of a decent password character length with the complexity of a uppercase, lowercase, special character, number, right? Those kind of common practices. Outdated software, we'll talk a little more about, but as time goes by, people discover more vulnerabilities in software, and because if it's there, people can just kind of keep trying things and then finding different ways to exploit it. So it's something that we all need to kind of stay on top of. Misconfigurations, we'll touch a little more on it, but again, your network devices, endpoints, group policies, unpatched systems in general, whether that's just Windows updates or aging systems, or just network appliances that maybe have outdated firmware, or just weak network security controls in general. So diving a little deeper, so things like application vulnerabilities, maybe there's an outdated TeamViewer or Ultra VNC, or if it's older Windows, maybe some remote desktop vulnerabilities. Any kind of convenience-based application is typically going to have some sort of vulnerabilities associated with it. And of course, vendors try to update these all the time, but there's always a cat and mouse game. Maybe there's an outdated PuTTY, or you'd be surprised how many vulnerabilities iTunes actually has, little things like that. So these are all things to keep in mind. And then of course, the standard network vulnerabilities, so things like simple network management protocol, SNMP, SSH, of course, is pretty widely used, as well as the rest of these very common protocols. DNS exploits or vulnerabilities are very, very common. So these are all things to keep in mind. And firmware vulnerabilities as well, whether that's your core switches, or your firewall appliance, or even wireless access points, even IoT devices, which are, let's be honest, quite a security nightmare in and of themselves, but those do have their own firmware a lot of times on these little ESP chips, and those can be vulnerable as well. And once an attacker has control of that, they can use that as a linchpin to just penetrate further within your network, especially if it's not segmented and secured properly. So we're concerned with all vulnerabilities, of course, but the reality is you want to try to address the most critical ones first, because those are the largest threat. So we'll take a look at a level 5 vulnerability in a moment, but essentially what this approach is, this is more along the lines of a virtual scanner appliance approach, where a virtual scanner appliance is deployed, at which point it's going to check all of the all the systems that networks were allowing it to scan and look for any vulnerabilities there, essentially simulating the low-hanging fruit that a bad actor would be looking to exploit during their asset discovery phase. With this type of implementation, it is on the client to remediate. You'll get a report with details on how to do that, but we'll talk about the other approach in just a moment. Just want to make it clear, this is not to be confused with pen testing, that a vulnerability assessment should definitely be part of that. However, it's not to be confused with that. That is, pen testing is its own thing and is a much more in-depth task, but VA should absolutely be part of it. So we'll take a look here at the vulnerability that is a level 5. Now this is an old server, so it's not too surprising that you'd see something like a Microsoft Server message block vulnerability. But you'll see the various, the CVE links, common vulnerabilities and exposures, so you can click on those and get a lot more details, but there will also be details as far as what the impact is and the solution and what you're actually patching. Depending on the vulnerability, you'll get different details, of course. And just looking at another vulnerability, again, we're primarily concerned with the highest criticality rate. However, we don't want to necessarily ignore the others as well. So things like a NetBIOS sharing vulnerability. So it's going to be classified as a level 3, but these are things that are very common. So you can see down below if the admin share is exposed. A lot of backup solutions and centrally managed solutions use that. So you may want that, depends on your environment and your needs, but these are all things to take into account. So the other approach is more of a agent-based approach. So rather than deploying a virtual appliance, it's deploying a agent as a system service, or as a Windows service rather. And this allows much greater visibility of the apps within that host because it has that system level authentication and can see all of that. So basically system policies can be configured for auto patching, which takes a lot of stress and tasks off of systems admins. And anything that can't be auto patched, let's say there's some kind of policy that needs to be changed, it's not going to necessarily tweak that for you. A outdated application, it can just go ahead and update that and patch it. But for other things, there will be instructional guidance that's provided. And moving on to asset discovery, this is one of the first things we're going to do before a vulnerability scan is to see all the devices that are on there, leveraging that virtual scanner appliance. So the question you need to ask yourself is, are you confident you have visibility of each device? Do you have a bring your own device policy that could leave you potentially vulnerable? We're primarily involved in the MXDR space, and which is going to augment your existing security solutions, enhance visibility, giving you a single pane of glass, seeing a lot more in your environment than you otherwise would, and just generally adding multiple layers of additional security. But the reason we think it's so important to combine this as vulnerability assessment is to just fortify it as much as possible from both a proactive standpoint in terms of vulnerability scanning and a reactive standpoint based on MXDR. So you can catch systems that maybe aren't retired or deployed unknowingly, perhaps personal devices on the network, virtual machines that were left running. Oftentimes, if there's a staff change or something like that, maybe this is a lot of times how servers that are supposed to be retired end up running. And just to give a quick example, a customer had an old 2003 virtual machine running, and it was listening on the default SSH port 22. They thought it had been retired, and it's really a prime target for compromise. And Asset Discovery was able to reveal that. So we can see it'll show you the IP and the host name or fully qualified. And then it'll have the ports it's listening on down below, which are, of course, just prime targets to go ahead and try to compromise that host as attackers go deeper within your network from wherever they first penetrated. So internal or inside versus outside threats. Attacks can really come from anywhere these days, whether that's inside your environment, maybe a student doing something they probably shouldn't be doing, or outside your network perimeter. So foreign logins to endpoints or your cloud infrastructure. If you're self-hosting, external scans are arguably even more vital, or you can just simply check to ensure ports are closed appropriately. But if you know you have ports that are listening inward, if you're hosting some kind of web server or something like that, you definitely want to make sure that that's as solid as possible. Just another thing to keep in mind, COVID and the whole pandemic and working from home led to a lot of many insecure connection methods. Some are more secure than others, depends on who is administering it, of course. But there were a lot of there was a big jump to just allow people in, whereas that may not have been done before. So even though we're very much coming out of that or out of it, very important to just circle back and make sure that if there's an exception that no longer needs to be there, that's taken into account and closed appropriately. All right, so how does it work? We talked about it a little bit before, but in general, there's two approaches. One is the virtual scanner appliance approach, where you deploy that in a virtual machine, or it can be deployed to cloud as well. There's no agent for this. The virtual machine is constantly updated with new vulnerabilities that come on the digital landscape. But again, this approach is required for the recipient of the scan to patch those themselves. But the other approach is the agent, which is going to install as a Windows service, continually update as well as new vulnerabilities surface, can be configured for auto patching, and this one goes straight to the cloud, so there's no need for any firewall exceptions. With the virtual scanner method, it needs to be allowed to reach anything that you want scanned, otherwise it's just going to be blocked and you're not going to get the results you want. But the agent, it's already on there, it has that level of access already, and you just can set that to go, and it'll patch things very nicely for you. All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here and have Daniel take back over.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. That was a lot of great information. Appreciate that. And before we go to the Q&A, and again, feel free to use the chat feature or the Q&A to submit your questions. Let me tell you just a little bit about Securus 360, give you an idea of who we are and what we do. So Securus 360, we are 100% focused on the education space, and we offer a managed extended detection and response platform, MXDR, to protect school districts from cyber attacks. And our secret sauce is that we provide the best of both worlds. We have multi-vector detection on one side, and then we have a full service SOC on the other. So in terms of monitoring, we go far beyond your endpoints. We monitor your network, your email, cloud, user behavior. I'm being told I'm sharing the wrong screen here. So let me try this again. Not sure what's going on. We'll fix that in a second. Okay, people will let me know if this is better. Okay. This still good? Okay. So we monitor beyond your endpoints, and then also we have the SOC. So we give you full visibility across your entire network, and then we have folks, analysts who jump on potential threats with investigation, verification, containment, mitigation, things like that. We do this through a two-tiered hybrid intelligence platform. So we have hundreds of machine learning algorithms which are analyzing security data from all kinds of different devices across your network. We do threat hunting, and then the human analysts, right? So they work to confirm threats, further analyze things, and then work with the client on the remediation. We monitor threats data different ways, monitor for known threats using rules and signatures, for unknown threats, as long as we know the attacker, right? So that's where threat intel sources come into play with MITRE attacks, on NIST and things like that. And also threat hunting, right? This is kind of the key where we are able to detect unknown threats from unknown attackers. And you are familiar with this model, right? The 4 quadrants. And it's the advanced threat hunting capability that allows us to detect threats in your blind spot. That's the area where we are looking for unknown threats from unknown actors. We don't even know what those attacks might be. They're zero-day attacks, completely brand new threats. And if you have a firewall already, or an AV or an EDR platform in place, we can integrate with these products. So we augment and complement that technology that you already have in place, and we add the next level of security to make sure you have full protection. And of course, if you already have EDR or SIEM, if you don't have that, in that case, our solution includes those pieces. So these are all the pieces of the product. Gives you full coverage, full protection, vulnerability assessments, and patch management is included, and it's also available standalone. And we back up our product and our services with a $500,000 cyber warranty, which adds an additional layer of financial security that goes a long way with the overall protection of a school district. So with that, let's look at the questions, and we have a few. Question number 1 here is, how could vulnerability scans prevent a ransomware attack?
Yeah, great question. So essentially the answer is by reducing the attack surface. So bad actors are looking for low-hanging fruit to compromise. So first thing you want to do, well, aside from having a solid security stack in place, ideally with some kind of MXDR solution, you want to take that proactive approach and reduce the amount of things that a bad actor could compromise, and that's going to limit their movement. So that's where it's going to help prevent something like that, just removing the attack, reducing the attack surface.
Okay, that makes sense. Another question is, if vulnerability assessment scans only provide protection for known exploits, how does it provide protection for threats that have not been discovered yet by MITRE or NIST, for example?
Ooh, great question. So the short answer is, for unknown threats, it's vulnerability assessments are not going to help with that directly. And that's why it's so important to have multiple solutions. Again, there's no silver bullet for ransomware. So ideally, a MXDR solution is really what's going to protect against exploits that are not known yet, zero-day attacks, things like that. But for things like known attacks, both vulnerability assessments and your antivirus are going to be kind of the tools there, whereas things like MXDR, your EDR and monitoring with a SOC team, those are going to be more so for things like unknown threats.
Okay. All right, here's a question. Bear with me, it's a long one. How does your vulnerability scanning and auto patching solution deploy to workstations? And then follow-up question, can we decide which updates to process so they can be vetted for application compatibility?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we do is we'll provide you the agent in a secure fashion, and you basically deploy that throughout your environment, whether you want to do that manually or if you want to integrate that with some kind of RMM, that's definitely an option. As far as which updates, absolutely. So each site may have different requirements. Sometimes if there's specific applications, maybe .NET updates or something like that might break it. That's entirely possible depending on those. So absolutely, we put playbooks together or send you a spreadsheet in terms of what to patch, what not to patch, and then we just we kick that off.
Okay. And Mark, I see your question. This is more like a sales question. I appreciate that. I'll get back to you and we'll discuss that. So I'll reach out to you. Okay, and then we have another question. This is, okay, will using a a VA scanner, so that's a vulnerability assessment scanner, I guess. So will using a vulnerability assessment scanner add to alert fatigue? We are using our own SIEM, and it's already a pain to dig through all these alerts.
Yeah, so it's definitely not going to add to alert fatigue. If anything, it would actually reduce it. If, let's say, whatever solution you're currently using that's generating all of these alerts, if those are common vulnerabilities that can be patched, it would actually reduce it at that point. It's certainly not going to add to any alert fatigue. However, if you want to reduce alert fatigue, MXDR is the way to go there. If that's the primary goal, a vulnerability assessment is very helpful. We'd recommend that to everyone. But if that goal is reducing alert fatigue, I can't think of a better option than MXDR. And of course, you want to combine that with vulnerability assessments anyway.
Yeah, and make sure the MXDR service comes with the proper SOC that have the bandwidth to investigate and communicate and work with you on these different alerts and make sure that they can remediate it before they become a problem. Okay, any more questions? This is what I'm seeing. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. If any questions come up as you are maybe digesting what after this call, what we talked about, or you just discuss it with a colleague, any questions come up, feel free to reach out to Jeff or myself. I'll put our contact information on the screen here in a second. But quick housekeeping note, next webinar is on September 21st. That's another Thursday in 2 months. And this will be really cool. We'll be talking, it'll be a real case study. We'll be talking about our MXDR platform deployed at a school district in this case, and we'll have the district CTO on the call. So he'll be available for live interview and questions, talking about how they are using the platform, how it's working for them, all these things. So, this is going to be one of your peers sharing their experience. So really looking forward to that. Here's our contact information. And yeah, feel free to reach out for technical questions. Jeff will be happy to answer any questions you have. And if you want to talk about our platform, either a complete MXDR or vulnerability assessments, feel free to reach out to me. Happy to discuss your needs and your requirements and help you find a good solution. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.